In the summer of 1989, inside one of the most expensive neighborhoods in America, two brothers called 911 to report that their parents had been shot inside the family home. For months, investigators treated them as grieving sons. Then the story turned, and what came next became one of the most argued about cases in American history. Were Lyle and Eric Menendez cold-blooded killers who murdered their parents for money, or two young men who said they acted out of years of fear and abuse? More than 30 years later, the country still hasn't agreed. This is the Menendez case. Jose Menendez was a Cuban-born executive who had built a powerful career in the entertainment and music industry. His wife, Mary Louise, known as Kitty, managed the family's life in Beverly Hills, California. Their two sons, Lyle, 21, and Eric, 18, grew up in wealth, but also under intense pressure to succeed and to project the image of a perfect family. From the outside, the Menendezes looked like they had everything. On the night of August 20th, 1989, Jose and Kitty were shot to death inside the den of their mansion. The crime was sudden and shocking, and in the beginning there were no obvious suspects. At first, Beverly Hills detectives looked outward, including at whether the killings might be connected to Jose's business world. But as weeks passed, attention shifted to the sons. In the months after the funerals, the brothers spent heavily on cars, businesses, and a lavish lifestyle, and that spending drew the notice of investigators. The decisive break came from an unexpected direction. Eric had spoken with his psychologist, Dr. Jerome Oziel, about the killings. Through a chain of events involving the therapist and a person close to him, police learned the brothers had discussed the crime in those sessions. In March 1990, Lyle and then Eric were arrested and charged with murdering their parents. The question was no longer who, it was why. The first trial, in the early 1990s, was carried on national television and became a courtroom drama the whole country followed. Each brother was tried in front of his own jury. The defense laid out a disturbing account. Years of sexual and psychological abuse by their father, they argued, which left the brothers believing their parents were going to kill them to keep that abuse hidden. Prosecutors rejected that explanation entirely. The motive, they argued, was far older and far simpler: money. The brothers, the state said, killed to inherit a multi-million-dollar estate, then spent freely once their parents were gone. After months of testimony, both juries deadlocked. Neither could agree on a verdict, and the judge declared a mistrial. The second trial was a different fight. This time, the brothers were tried together in front of a single jury, and the judge sharply limited much of the abuse testimony the defense had leaned on the first time. Cameras were kept out of the courtroom. In 1996, Lyle and Eric Menendez were convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy. They were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For nearly 2 decades, that looked like the final word. Then years later, the case came roaring back, this time online. Public attention focused on evidence the original juries never fully weighed. One piece was a letter Eric is said to have written to a cousin in 1988, before the killings, that referenced abuse at home. Another was a public allegation from a former member of the boy band Menudo, who said Jose Menendez had abused him in the 1980s. Streaming documentaries and a hit dramatized series brought the case to a generation that hadn't lived through the trials, and a movement to free the brothers gained serious momentum. In late 2024, the Los Angeles District Attorney, then in office, asked a court to resentence them, a move that could open a path to release. But that fall, voters elected a new district attorney who reviewed the case and opposed it. In May 2025, a judge resentenced the brothers to 50 years to life. Because they were under 26 when the crime took place, that made them immediately eligible for parole under California law. But eligibility is not freedom. In August 2025, the State Parole Board denied both brothers, pointing in part to their conduct while in prison, and set their next reviews years away. Around the same time, a separate request for a new trial was rejected. The court found the newer evidence wasn't strong enough to undo the convictions. As of this episode, their remaining path runs through a clemency request still pending before California's governor. So why does this case still split people so sharply? Because two things can feel true at the same time: that a terrible crime was committed and that the people who committed it may have been shaped by something terrible themselves. At Shinwari Files, we lay out what the courts actually found and what's still being argued and let you weigh it for yourself. New case files every week.